Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mary if you're new here, and today we're going to be talking about my May wrap-up and my June hopefuls. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first we'll just go over some May stats before we get into each individual book. So I read a total of 9 books. Of those, 8 were physical and 1 was an ebook, and I did not do any audiobooks this month. And I had 1 DNF. And the amount of pages that I read was 3,538 pages. And for the genre breakdown, I believe it was 55% romance, 33% classics, and 11% fiction. So a pretty good breakdown. Usually my romance category is pretty high, but it was a good breakdown and a good, amount of different books. So I'm happy with that. So I just have my reading journal here just to reference my notes, or else I'll just be rambling and be scatterbrained for every single book. The first book that I read was Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert. So I read this as an ebook through Libby, and I gave this a 3 stars. Back in the day when Talia Hibbert's The Brown Sisters trilogy came out, I was obsessed and loved each book so much. I think I gave around 4 to 5 stars for each book. And so when I heard she was coming out with a new book, I was so excited. I put it on my, spring TBR. I was pumped for this book. And I don't want to say that I was disappointed with the book, but honestly, I should have known better because it is a YA romance. It just didn't hit the same as the Brown Sisters trilogy, which is, just adult romance or not YA. So it didn't hit the same, but I still enjoyed it. I mean, I did like the characters. It was set in high school, so it was a little less relatable. The premise of like getting a scholarship and kind of being like friends to enemies to lovers, I like that trope. But overall, it took me a long time to get into this book and actually care for the characters. It wasn't anything with the writing or anything like that. I guess I wasn't expecting a YA romance, even though it was a YA romance, so it's kind of all on me. But overall, 3-star read. Wasn't horrible, wasn't perfect, it was just somewhere in between. The next book I read, I do not have the physical copy of because I lent it to my friend, but it is Happy Place by Emily Henry, which everyone was obsessed with when it came out. People are still obsessed with it, as they should be. I gave this a 5 stars. Personally, I loved this story. I really resonated with Harriet and her people-pleasing tendencies. I thought Win was such an amazing book boyfriend. I just found their story and their miscommunications very relatable. So many people hate miscommunication in romance, but it happens in every single relationship in your life. And I think because it can be so relatable and so hitting close to home, a lot of people don't like it. But even though some of it was kind of extreme, I still just loved this book so much. It was just a 5-star to me, and Emily Henry's writing got so good. It got so much more vivid and descriptive in this book. You can just see that she is getting better and better as a writer, or she has better editors. I'm not sure which one, maybe a combination of both, but I really enjoyed this book because it is by far my favorite Emily Henry book. The next book I read was David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. So this is my first official Dickens. I was picking up A Christmas Carol around Christmas time, but then I got kind of busy, so I never finished that. I got 5 pages in. It was not enough to fully be able to experience a Dickens novel and his beautiful writing. And so I was able to do that through Mr. Copperfield. I went through many different phases of emotions through this book. I loved it in the beginning, then I got bored in the middle, and then it picked up again near the end. And I reflected a lot about this book because you're really just following this guy David Copperfield, his life from beginning to basically the end, and you get parts that are boring, parts that are kind of monotonous, mundane life things. Then you see David go through parts of his life where you don't like his actions, don't like the person that he is. And then there are parts where you're rooting for him, you're rooting for his family, you know, you feel bad for him. So it really made me reflect on, like, this book is just a representation of life. You go through phases where you're not a good person, or you are a good person, or you're going through something that is very hard, or you're just going through life like every day is the same. And in the end, life is just those Wednesdays. I think there was a quote where, like, it was about relationships where, like, you have to be okay with having just Wednesdays with your partner, because weekends only come around once in a while where you have these big exciting moments, but most of your life spent with someone is a Wednesday. It's just a normal hump day. You know, you get through the mundane tasks. Every day is kind of the same, and then you have these moments of life that are special and bring spark back into life, and that's what I felt like with this book. So with all that to say, I gave this a 4 stars, and I really enjoyed it. And there were some very, very quotable parts. I put a review on Instagram about this book with some of my favorite quotes and passages. But yeah, I'm happy that this is my first Dickens. A lot of people say they don't like this book, especially when they have read Dickens before, because his writing can be very similar from book to book, or the stories that he says are very similar. So I'm interested to see more Dickens. I own a lot of his books. I have a lot of them here. I have A Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations, Oliver Twist, Christmas Carol. I have a lot of his books, so I am excited to pick up more, and yeah, love this. I'm gonna skip one book and I'll get back to it just because I want to talk about The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. So I read both this and David Copperfield for a Game of Tomes book club that's hosted by Carolyn Marie Reads and Emmy on YouTube. And so this is my first time reading The Catcher in the Rye. I know it is mostly a high school read for a lot of people. I didn't have to read it in high school. I think I read a different book instead. But overall, I did enjoy this book. It's so short. I read it in 2 days, and I do think it warrants a reread, because once you finish it, you kind of like start thinking about what the heck happened in the book. It kind of comes a little bit full circle, and then you kind of fall in love with Holden, even though he is such a whiny, bratty, hormonal teenager. He's also a lonely, hopeless kid. And so you go through so many emotions, similar to David Copperfield, where you don't like him, then you do like him. He makes you laugh, he makes you cringe. So it was a great story. I do want to reread it. I gave this a 3.5 stars. I didn't enjoy it as much as David Copperfield's, but I do think if you read this slowly, you will get more out of it, because it is so short. Each sentence means a lot in this book. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but yeah, I did laugh a lot. I thought it was hilarious. Thought many parts were very cringy, and I also just felt very hard for Holden, because this kid, man, he's gone through a lot, and at the end of the day, he's just a kid that wants attention and a loving home, and he doesn't have it. My favorite quote is, "I'm quite illiterate, but I read a lot." I wrote that down here. So yeah, great book. I look forward to rereading, but for now, 3.5 stars. Then jumping back to the book that I read before The Catcher in the Rye, it is Never Fall for Your Fiancé by Virginia Heath. So I picked this up on a whim at Goodwill, because usually the Goodwill near me does not have a lot of romances, but they had this one, and it is kind of like a historical romance. Yeah, kind of like a historical slash, what is it called? Like regal romance. So basically, this guy hires this girl to be his fake fiance. So they become friends. Then they become enemies. Then they come back to friends. Then they become lovers. So it was a funny book. I did enjoy this. It did take me longer to read than a normal romance, but I did enjoy that, because usually I read romance so quick, because romances are page turners. They keep you hooked and they make you want to read so much. But being engrossed in this world for well over a week was very fun. I did think about it a lot more than I typically do romances, but I did only end up giving it a 3.5 stars because it just didn't like catch my heart the same way that other romances have in the past. Some parts were crazy and extravagant and ridiculous, but it just made the storyline so much more fun. I thought Hugh was such a great character. I think he is my favorite out of the two. Minerva, she was good, but Hugh, he was just good. I liked him a lot, and you saw his character develop a lot throughout this book. Then moving on, the next two books you would have seen in my prior vlog, which was the reading the 5 oldest books on my Goodreads TBR. So I've got the Kite Runner, so I will go through this quickly. I gave the Kite Runner 4 stars. I did really enjoy it. It wasn't a 5-star read, but it is pretty darn close. It breaks your heart, and it is hopeful at the same time. Amir and Hassan will stay with me for many, many years to come, but it was also very hard to read and very hard to digest some of the things that happened in this book. But I do think that was meant for a reason, and it was purposeful. So very hard book to read, but I do suggest it. I think it is really a phenomenal book, but I would read trigger warnings before heading into this book because it covers not so many light topics. It is very hard, but yeah, 4-star read. You can go back to my last vlog to just get more of my reactions for this book, but overall, fantastic. And then I have Little Women here. So my editions of Little Women, this is part 1 of Little Women, part 2, Good Wives, I have in a box set behind these books. So technically I read part 1 of Little Woman, but this is how it was initially published as a singular book. So reading part 1, it's a little confusing, but reading part 1, I gave part 1 4 stars. I did enjoy it. It did take me a while to get into this book because of the massive book slump I had after reading The Book Thief. So, you know, for halfway through the book, I was not really caring so much about the characters, and I did try listening it through audiobook, but I didn't enjoy it. So halfway through, ditched the audiobook and just read it physically, and I really enjoyed it a lot more. So my favorite characters are Marmee, Joe, and Lori. I think they were all amazing. I did read a spoiler about Joe that happens in Good Wives, and I'm not happy about it. But this did end abruptly, but knowing that it is part 1 now and part 2 continues on the story, I understand why it ended kind of abruptly. But yeah, enjoyed it, thought it was really good. Gave it a 4 stars, not quite 5-star read, but I do think because of my book hangover, it definitely hindered my reading experience of this because I know so many people, my friends, family, and also people online that have given this a 5 stars. So I also want to read Good Wives because I'm sure that adds a lot more to the story than just the part 1 of Little Women. I guess we can talk about my DNF. So I DNF'd The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I talked about this in my last vlog as well. Didn't enjoy it, was not hooked. It put me in a book slump for like 2 weeks because I just didn't want to pick it up, and I was being very stubborn about not DNFing it, that I like barely read for 2 weeks. So I just didn't care for this. I thought it was not interesting. I read about 40%, I think, of the book and decided to DNF. Very sad about it because I own the first 2 books, but hopefully it will go to a nice home that someone else will be able to enjoy these 2 books and this series. So sad, but see ya. I have my box of DNFs and donations here, so it can stay there. The next book I read was If the Shoe Fits by Julie Murphy. So this is a kind of Cinderella retelling mixed with The Bachelor. So it was a really cool premise. I just don't think it was executed the way that I wanted it to be, but it was still fun nonetheless. It was a page turner. I read this within 24 hours. Gave it a 3 stars because I just wasn't obsessed with the couple. And like the things that happened in the end were kind of more unbelievable. And like, I know romance is not always supposed to be believable because it is fiction, but I have a hard time with certain books detaching from reality because it's just a little too far from reality. If I didn't pick it up at the Penguin book sale, I probably would have regretted buying it, but I don't regret buying it because I paid $1 for it. I loved Henry as the male main character. Cindy was meh for me, but I did really enjoy Henry. But yeah, just the kind of like the ending and all the third act conflicts and how it all happened and then how it got resolved, I didn't really enjoy. Then the last book I read in May was Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. So I got a bone to pick with this book. I gave this a 3 stars. At first I didn't want to pick this up when it was like really popular because I heard it is kind of like the same as Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren, but worse. So I was like, well, I've already read Love in Other Words. Why would I read another book that is the same-ish premise, but people don't like it as much? But I decided to give it a chance, and I was loving this book. Let me tell you, like the first, I think 2/3 of this book, so almost a full book, loved it, obsessed with the summer vibes, obsessed with like the Summer I Turned Pretty vibes, where it's like a family cottage, you go there, you meet the boys next door, like loved, obsessed, loved the atmosphere, loved Percy, loved Sam. I loved like the going back in timelines of present day and like 13 years ago. But the twist, I guessed the twist like maybe 25 pages or so before it was revealed. I was like, this better not be the twist because I will be really pissed because I hate this trope and it will ruin this book. And then it happened and it ruined the book. It's just something that like is unforgivable in real life and would never happen. And so those are the scenarios where, you know, I just cannot detach myself from reality to enjoy the book because it's just not the trope for me. Loved the first 2/3 of the book, did not enjoy the last third, and yeah, that's how I feel about this book. If I could detach myself from hating that trope, this would be a like fantastic read, but I just can't. So it's a 3-star, but very readable, page turner. Perfect summer vibes if you're looking for a summer book that reminds you of like childhood, as well as like the lake and all of those vibes. It's also set like Toronto, so you know, I was like, it's a Canadian author set in Toronto, summertime vibes, lake time cottage vibes. Like, what else would you want? I want the trope to be different. But yeah, that's that. Sadly, didn't love it, but those are the 9 books that I read in May. So it was a fun month. I did enjoy it. I have been in a bit of a reading slump for the past week, I think. Yeah, I finished Every Summer After May 23rd, and I really haven't picked up much since then. So I'm hoping to turn that around. It is June 1st today, so I'm hopeful that today I'll be reading more. But I want to talk about the books that I'm currently reading and then some hopefuls to read in June. I'm trying not to put too many expectations because summertime just gets so much busier for me that, you know, I'm more social, I'm not inside as much, so I don't get to read as much. And sadly, but also it is good to socialize. The 2 books that I'm currently reading are The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. So I am about 130 pages in. I'm a little behind on my daily tracker here. To be honest, Mother Nature blessed me a couple days ago, and I have been in debilitating pain for 3 days in bed, and I just could not get myself to read. So I'm a couple days behind, but really enjoying this, loving this book. I'm looking forward to reading it. I really want to pick it up, but You know, when you got those cramps, you can't hold a heavy book like this. This is a brick. You could really damage someone with this book. But yeah, really enjoying this so far. My first Dostoevsky, and the Hardcore Literature Club, Ben McAvoy, they read this last month, so all of his lectures are up. So I've been also following along the lectures while reading this, and it's really been enhancing the experience. So I love being a part of that club. But this I want to finish in the month of June. So I have a goal of about 20-25 pages a day, so I should get there by the end of June. The next book I'm reading is The Cruel Prince. So this is a part of my spring TBR. So I am almost 50 pages in. I am enjoying this. I'm just kind of in that slump right now where I'm not really like in the mood to read. So it has been hard to pick this one up. But so far so good. I don't really have any qualms with it, but I'm not also obsessed with it. So reading that. Then I also picked up Fourth Wing because everyone's talking about it, and I'm reading it with my sister and Vicky. So I'm supposed to be done chapters 1 to 10 by Sunday. Today is Thursday, and I haven't read one page. So hopefully I will pick this up soon. But because I just started The Cruel Prince, I'm like, this is kind of like two fantasies. I don't really want to mix them together. So I want to finish this before I start this. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. This has been hyped up like crazy. I was hunting this down. It was sold out on Indigo, sold out on Amazon, sold out everywhere near me. And then finally Indigo by me had like 2 in stock. So I drove to the store and picked it up at my lunchtime last week. But yeah, really excited. And it's even hardcover. I paid for a hardcover. This was $30. I don't want to talk about book prices in Canada. It makes me depressed. I'm also reading for a Game of Tomes book club, The Stranger by Albert Camus. This book was also very expensive for what it is, but I have no idea what this is about, but it's part of the book club, so we'll see. It is supposed to be read with the Brothers Karamazov, so I don't know if it will be similar, about like murder mystery, family type story. We will see. So I also want to pick up, I have them over there, but I'm not going to bring them here. I want to pick up The Hobbit and the first book of the Lord of the Rings series for the Hardcore Literature Club. They're reading that right now, so I want to be a part of that discussion. But I want to read The Hobbit first because I haven't read it yet, and some of the book club members were telling me that I should read The Hobbit first just for some background information before hopping into the first book of the Lord of the Rings series, so I'll be doing that. And then we're also reading a short story collection by Alice Munro, the Carried Away short story collection, and I have that coming in the mail hopefully next week, so I will be starting that as well. And then I want to tackle some of the books that I had on my spring TBR before it gets too summery, so we'll see what I end up picking from those books. I have quite the amount that I can select off that list, so yeah. And I've got so many romances here, so in between all these classics and fantasy, I can pick up some romances to cleanse the palate because I just love romances, so I like always fitting them where I can. So those are my June hopefuls and all the books that I read in May. Let me know what you guys read in May and what you're currently reading. Always looking for suggestions down below, and I will see you guys in my next video. Happy reading! Bye!